I was standing in a tuxedo holding a champagne glass when my father collapsed. At first, I thought he'd slipped. Then I saw his face. He looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. His hands were shaking. And my younger brother, Jason, was trying to grab his phone. "Give me that." Jason shouted. Dad pulled the phone to his chest. No. I had never heard my father sound like that. Weak. Broken. The wedding reception stopped around us. The music faded. People started staring. My brother looked terrified. "You're making a scene," he hissed. Dad looked up at him. A tear rolled down his face. "You've been charging me rent?" Silence. Every conversation in the ballroom died. I blinked. "What?" Dad turned toward me. His face had gone white. He's been charging me rent. I looked at my brother. What is he talking about? Jason looked trapped. Dad doesn't understand. Understand what? He swallowed. It's not a big deal. Dad actually laughed, except it didn't sound like laughter. It sounded like heartbreak. Not a big deal? I walked over. Dad, what happened? He handed me the phone. I looked at the screen. Bank transfers. Every month. Same amount. $2,000. Transferred from my father's account to Jason's. For almost 3 years. I looked up. What is this? Jason wouldn't look at me. Answer me. He sighed. It's rent. I thought I heard him wrong. Rent. He nodded. I stared. Our father was 72 years old, retired, a widower, and currently living in Jason's basement. Because after Mom died, Dad couldn't stay in the old house. Too many memories. Jason had insisted Dad move in with him. He'd called himself a devoted son. He'd told everyone he wanted Dad close. I even cried when he offered. I thought it was one of the kindest things I'd ever seen. Now I was staring at bank records. You're charging our father to live in your basement? Jason rubbed his forehead. I have expenses. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You own a 5-bedroom house. So, Dad helped you buy that house. He didn't buy it. He gave you the down payment. The room was completely silent. I looked around. His bride, Melissa, had gone pale. Her parents looked confused. Even the wedding photographer had stopped taking pictures. Dad sat down heavily. He said I was helping. I looked at him. What? He said paying rent would make me feel useful. I looked at Jason again. Please tell me you didn't say that. He stayed quiet. Dad kept talking. I didn't want to be a burden. His voice cracked. He said contributing would make me feel independent. I couldn't breathe, because my father was the kindest man I knew. The kind of man who apologized for taking up space. The kind of man who worked 43 years and never once spent money on himself. And somehow, my brother had convinced him to pay rent in a house that existed because Dad had helped buy it. I looked at Jason. When did this start? Almost 3 years ago. 3 years. I did the math. $72,000. I stared at him. You took $72,000 from Dad? Don't say it like that. How should I say it? He looked angry now. Defensive. I have kids. I almost laughed. I have 2 kids. I never charged our father rent. I moved Dad into my guest room every winter because he hated being alone. Jason knew that. He also knew I would have taken Dad in permanently. Dad had simply chosen Jason because Jason lived closer to his friends. I looked at Melissa. Did you know? She looked shocked. What? No. Jason turned toward her. Melissa, you charge your father rent? He sighed. It sounds worse than it is. She looked horrified. No, it sounds exactly like what it is. The entire ballroom went silent again. Then my father said something that made my blood run cold. I sold your mother's jewelry. Everyone looked at him. What? I whispered. He looked ashamed. You said money was tight. I turned slowly toward Jason. Dad kept talking. I sold her bracelets and the sapphire necklace because I didn't want your children to suffer. I couldn't move. Those were Mom's favorite pieces. She'd wanted our daughters to inherit them. Jason looked uncomfortable. Dad, and now I find out. Dad's voice broke. You never needed the money. Nobody said anything. Then Melissa quietly asked a question everyone was thinking. What did you spend it on? Jason didn't answer. She stepped closer. Jason. Nothing. Jason, what did you spend $72,000 on? He looked away, and that's when I noticed something. His eyes. I knew that look. I had seen it before. Years ago, right before he confessed he'd maxed out 3 credit cards. I looked at him carefully. You didn't spend it on the house. Silence. You didn't spend it on the kids. Silence. My stomach dropped. Oh no. He finally looked at me, and I suddenly realized exactly what had happened. I looked at him in disbelief. You've been gambling again, haven't you? Jason's face lost all color. The look on Jason's face told me everything. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. Melissa took a step back. No. Jason rubbed his forehead. Melissa? No. Her voice was shaking. You promised me. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioner humming. I looked at my brother. You been gambling? He sighed. It's not like before. I almost laughed. People only say that when it's exactly like before. Dad looked confused. Gambling. Jason closed his eyes. He hadn't told him. Of course he hadn't. Melissa looked at my father. You didn't know? Dad slowly shook his head. She covered her mouth. I suddenly felt sick. 10 years ago, Jason had developed a gambling problem. It started with sports betting, then online poker, then casinos. He nearly lost everything. Our parents bailed him out. I bailed him out. Together, we paid almost $40,000 of his debt. He swore he'd change. He went to counseling. He apologized. Eventually, everyone moved on. Apparently, everyone except me, because I'd never fully trusted him again. I looked at him. How much? He didn't answer. How much? Not here. I stepped closer. How much? He swallowed. Around 90. Melissa's face went white. $90,000? It's not all gone. I stared. How much is left? Silence. Jason. About 6. Nobody moved. $84,000. Gone. Just like that. Melissa looked like she might faint. You spent $84,000 gambling? I was trying to win it back. There it was. The sentence every gambler says. Trying to win it back. I closed my eyes. Because I'd heard it before. Dad suddenly looked very old. The rent money. Jason didn't answer. Dad's voice became small. You used my money? Jason looked miserable. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Dad stared at him. My retirement money? Silence. The money your mother and I saved? Silence. I watched my father's face crumble. And then something happened that I'd never seen before. He started crying. Not quietly. Not politely. He broke. His shoulders shook. His hands trembled. I thought I was helping. The entire room looked away. Because there are some things that feel too painful to witness. Watching a 72-year-old man realize his son had been using him was one of those things. Melissa started crying too. She looked at Jason like she'd never seen him before. Is that why we're always broke? He didn't answer. Is that why the credit cards keep increasing? Nothing. Is that why you wanted a bigger wedding budget? Still nothing. She shook her head. Oh my God. I suddenly remembered something. 3 months earlier, Jason had called me, asked if I could loan him $20,000. I said no. He'd gotten angry, accused me of being selfish. Now I knew why. He wasn't struggling. He was drowning, and he had been trying to hide it. Melissa wiped her eyes. How long? Jason looked down. About a year. She stared at him. You've been gambling for a year? On and off. She laughed bitterly. On and off. He didn't answer. She looked around the ballroom, at the guests, at the decorations, at the flowers, then back at him. How did you pay for all this? He looked uncomfortable. That made my stomach sink. Jason. Nothing. How did you pay for this wedding? He swallowed. Credit. Melissa froze. What? Credit cards. Silence. How much? He looked at the floor. About 30. Her face went blank. 30,000 for one wedding. Paid for a debt. Then she asked a question that changed everything. Are we broke? Jason didn't answer. Jason. Silence. She started crying harder. Are we broke? He nodded. She stared at him, then slowly sat down. I don't think she even realized she was doing it. She just folded into the chair. The entire reception had turned into a disaster. Nobody was eating. Nobody was talking. People looked uncomfortable, embarrassed, like they were witnessing something deeply private. Because they were. Dad finally looked at me. I gave him everything. I sat beside him. I know. I helped with college. I know. I helped with the house. I nodded. I know. I would have given him more if he asked. That hurt, because it was true. Dad would have given him everything. Again, and again, and again. Jason suddenly looked angry. Stop acting like I'm some criminal. I looked at him. You took $72,000 from Dad. I was going to pay him back. With what? Silence. I had a system. I actually laughed. A few guests looked startled, because I wasn't laughing. I was exhausted. A system? It was working. No, it wasn't. I just hit a bad streak. I stared at him. You still think you're going to win? He looked away, and that terrified me, because I realized something. This wasn't over. Not even close. Jason didn't think he had a problem. He thought he had bad luck. Dad suddenly asked quietly, Do you owe anybody money? Silence. I looked at Jason. He looked away. My heart sank. Jason? Nothing. Answer him. He swallowed. Then he whispered. Maybe. Every hair on my arm stood up. I looked at him. What does maybe mean? Silence. Jason. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Then he said 4 words that turned the entire room cold. I borrowed from people. Nobody moved. I stared at him. What people? He looked terrified, and for the first time all night, I realized my brother's problem was much bigger than money. I borrowed from people. Nobody moved. I stared at my brother. What people? He looked down. Friends. I didn't believe him. Which friends? Silence. Jason. He swallowed. People I met online. Every alarm in my head went off. What kind of people? I don't know. I blinked. You borrowed money from people whose names you don't even know? He looked miserable. They use usernames. Melissa looked horrified. You're joking. Nobody laughed. He rubbed his face. It started small. How much? I asked. Silence. Jason. 20. 20,000? He nodded. My stomach dropped. Dad looked like he couldn't process what he was hearing. You borrowed $20,000 from strangers? Jason looked miserable. I thought I could pay it back. By gambling? He nodded. I closed my eyes. This was worse than I thought. Much worse. Then I noticed something. Jason kept checking his phone. Every few seconds. I held out my hand. Give me your phone. No. Give me the phone. It's private. I stood up. Jason. The way I said his name must have done something, because he slowly handed it to me. I unlocked it. 3 unread messages. All from the same contact. No name. Just a number. I opened the messages. Payment overdue. You promised Friday. If you don't answer tonight, we'll come to you. I froze. Melissa looked at me. What? I looked at Jason. What is this? He looked sick. Nothing. I turned the screen toward him. Nothing. Dad was staring at me. I handed him the phone. He read the messages. His face went white. They're threatening you. Jason didn't answer. The next message arrived while we were all looking at the screen. Don't ignore us. We know where you live. The ballroom suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Melissa covered her mouth. Oh my God. I looked at my brother. Who are these people? I don't know. How much do you owe them? Silence. I grabbed his shoulder. How much? He looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. 40. I let go. $40,000. I couldn't speak. Melissa couldn't either. Dad looked like he was about to be sick. You borrowed $40,000 from dangerous strangers? I thought I could double it. Nobody said anything, because there was nothing left to say. He lost $84,000, taken $72,000 from our father, charged $30,000 to credit cards, and borrowed $40,000 from people who knew where he lived. I suddenly understood something. He wasn't broke. He was ruined. Melissa slowly stood up. Do they know our address? Silence. Jason. He nodded. She took a step backward. Our kids live there. Nobody moved. Our children sleep there. He looked like he might cry. I never thought. No, you didn't. She was shaking now. No wonder you've been acting weird. She pointed at him. You changed the security system. Silence. You started checking outside every night. Silence. You stopped letting the kids play in the front yard. She looked horrified. You knew. He couldn't look at her. She sat back down. I had never seen someone lose trust so completely. Dad suddenly stood. I'm paying it. I turned. What? He looked determined. I'm paying them. No, they can't threaten my grandchildren. Dad, I still have savings. No, I can sell investments. No. He looked at me desperately. What else am I supposed to do? That question broke my heart, because even now, even after everything, he was trying to save Jason. Again, I put my hand on his shoulder. You are not giving him another dollar. But, no. Jason looked ashamed. Dad, no. I looked at him. This stops tonight. The room was silent. Then an older man stood up. I recognized him. Melissa's father. He'd barely spoken all evening. He looked at Jason. Are my daughter and grandchildren safe? Jason swallowed. I think so. The man laughed once. A hard, humorless laugh. You think so? Silence. He looked at me. How bad is this? I answered honestly. I don't know. The older man nodded. Then he did something unexpected. He took out his phone. What are you doing? Melissa asked. I'm calling the police. Jason's head snapped up. No. Why not? They haven't done anything. They're threatening you. I can handle it. The old man looked at him. No, son. He glanced around the ruined reception. You clearly can't. Silence. Then another message appeared. This time, everyone saw it. Last chance. Answer your phone. Melissa started crying. Dad sat back down. I looked at my brother. He looked terrified. And for the first time all night, I think reality finally hit him. This wasn't about gambling anymore. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about his family, his children, their safety, his entire life. He looked at me. I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Fear, real fear. Then he whispered, I think I ruined everything. I looked at him, at the destroyed wedding reception, at our crying father, at Melissa, at the guests who had stopped pretending not to listen. And I realized something. No, he hadn't ruined everything. Not yet, because for the first time since this nightmare started, he was finally telling the truth. But I had no idea that the next phone call would reveal something even worse. The phone in my hand suddenly started ringing. It was the same unknown number, and my brother looked absolutely terrified. The phone kept ringing. Nobody moved. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. Jason looked like he couldn't breathe. Answer it, I said. No. Answer it. No. The phone stopped. 3 seconds later, it rang again. Melissa stood up. Put it on speaker. Jason stared at her. No. Put it on speaker. I can't. Why? He looked around the room. At me. At our father. At her. Then he whispered, because they'll be angry. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I grabbed the phone and answered. Hello. Silence. Then a man's voice. Calm. Cold. Who is this? I'm Jason's brother. Another pause. Where's Jason? I looked at him. He was pale. He's here. Good. The man sounded almost relieved. Tell him we're tired of waiting. Nobody in the room moved. I put the call on speaker. The man continued. He owes us money. I know. Then you know he lies. I looked at my brother. The man kept talking. He promised payment last Friday. He doesn't have it. I know. A long silence. Then, he also promised us he'd borrow it from his family. I slowly turned toward Jason. His eyes closed. Oh no. The man laughed softly. He didn't tell you that part? Melissa looked horrified. What part? She whispered. I felt sick. The voice answered for him. 3 months ago, your brother said his family was wealthy and he'd have access to money soon. I stared at Jason. You planned to ask us. Silence. You planned this. Jason looked down. I couldn't believe it. That $20,000 loan he'd asked me for, it wasn't for an emergency. It wasn't for bills. He was trying to pay gamblers. The man spoke again. He also mentioned a wedding. Melissa's face went white. I looked at my brother. You were going to use wedding gifts. Silence. You were going to use our wedding money? No, he said quickly. The voice interrupted. That's not what he told us. Silence. The entire room stared at my brother. The man continued. He said there would be cash gifts. He said his wife's family had money. He said he'd settle everything after the wedding. Melissa looked like she had been slapped. Her father stepped in front of her. I had never seen him look so angry. You plan to use my daughter's wedding gifts to pay gambling debts? Jason couldn't answer, because it was true. The man on the phone sighed. Honestly, this is sad. Nobody spoke. Then he said something unexpected. Look, I'm not coming to your house. I frowned. What? We're not criminals. The entire room blinked. The man sounded irritated. We're idiots who lend money online. That's all. I exchanged confused looks with Melissa. The man continued. But your brother keeps lying. Silence. He tells everyone different stories. Sick relatives. Business opportunities. Medical emergencies. I looked at Jason. The man sighed again. I'm done. I don't care anymore. He can deal with collections. Collections? I frowned. What do you mean? I mean exactly that. The man's voice became tired. The debt was sold yesterday. Nobody moved. What? He ignored us for months. We sold the debt. To who? The answer came immediately. A collection agency. I stared. That's it. That's it. Silence. The entire ballroom seemed to exhale. The man laughed. You thought we were gangsters, didn't you? Nobody answered. He laughed again. Tell your brother to get help. Click. The line disconnected. Silence. Absolute silence. Then Melissa sat down. Again. She looked exhausted. Her father looked exhausted. I looked at my brother. You lied to everyone. He nodded. You scared your wife. He nodded. You scared Dad. He nodded. You scared yourself. He started crying. Real crying. Not dramatic. Not manipulative. He just broke. I don't know how to stop. Nobody moved. I keep thinking I can fix it. He wiped his face. I keep thinking one more win changes everything. He looked at our father. I'm sorry. Dad didn't answer. Jason looked at Melissa. I'm sorry. She didn't answer either. Then he looked at me. I know you hate me. I thought about it. I really did. Then I sighed. No. He looked surprised. I don't hate you. I looked around the room. I think you're sick. Silence. And I think you've been sick for a long time. He started crying harder. I don't know what to do. For a second, nobody said anything. Then our father stood. He walked over and hugged him. I couldn't believe it. After everything, he hugged him. Jason completely fell apart. I'm sorry, Dad. I know. I'm so sorry. I know. I ruined everything. Dad held him tighter. No. We all looked at him. Dad's eyes were red. You made terrible choices. Jason cried harder. But you're still my son. Nobody spoke. Then Dad looked at me, and suddenly he looked ashamed. I think I helped create this. What? He looked at Jason. I rescued him every time. Silence. I never let him fail. He looked at me, and I expected you to be strong, because you always were. I didn't know what to say. He looked heartbroken. I wasn't fair to you. 20 years. I'd waited 20 years to hear those words. I thought they would feel amazing. Instead, they just made me sad, because my father looked broken. I walked over and hugged him. Then something strange happened. He cried too, and for the first time in my entire life, I hugged both my father and my brother at the same time. The entire ballroom was silent. Then Melissa's father cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. He pointed at Jason. "The wedding is canceled." Jason blinked. "What?" "The wedding." Silence. "It is canceled." Melissa looked up. Her father crossed his arms. "You need help." Nobody argued. "You are not getting married tomorrow." The room fell silent again. Then Melissa quietly spoke, and what she said changed everything. "I agree." Jason looked at her like he'd been punched. "I agree." Nobody moved. Jason looked at Melissa like he hadn't heard her correctly. "What?" She stood up slowly. "I said I agree." "Melissa?" "No." Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was tired, completely exhausted. "I can't do this." Tears rolled down her face. "I can't marry someone I don't trust." The room stayed silent. Jason looked devastated. "I love you." She nodded. "I know. I'll fix it." She closed her eyes. "That's the problem." He stared at her. "You've been saying that for years." Silence. "I'll fix it. I'll change. It'll get better." She wiped her tears. But things never get better. He looked like he was falling apart. "I'll go to therapy." "I hope you do." "I'll stop gambling." "I hope you do." "I'll pay everyone back." "I hope you do." Every answer was the same. Not angry, not cruel, just finished. Then she looked directly at him. "But you need to do those things because you want to become healthy." Her voice cracked. "Not because you're afraid of losing me." Jason couldn't speak. "I love you," she whispered. "But I don't recognize you anymore." Silence. "I'm scared all the time." She looked at her father. "I'm scared about money." She looked at our father. "I'm scared about what happened to him." Then she looked back at Jason. "And tonight I realize I'm scared of marrying someone who lies when he's drowning." He started crying again. She walked over and hugged him. The entire room seemed to stop breathing. "I want you to get better," she whispered. He held on to her like he was afraid she'd disappear. Then she gently stepped away. "But I can't marry you tomorrow." Nobody said anything. Finally, Jason nodded. A tiny nod. Then another. He looked completely broken. "I understand." I honestly didn't expect him to say that. Neither did Melissa. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then her father put his arm around her shoulders. Dad sat down again. He looked exhausted, older than I'd ever seen him. I sat beside him. "You okay?" He gave a sad laugh. "No." I nodded. "Me neither." Silence. Then he looked at me. "I'm sorry." I frowned. "For what?" He looked toward Jason. "For making you become the responsible one." I didn't answer. He continued. "You were 12 when your mother died." I swallowed. "You started helping with groceries." I remembered. "You started helping with bills." I remembered. "You never asked for anything." I remembered. His eyes filled with tears. "And I leaned on you." I looked away, because he wasn't wrong. I had become an adult very early, while Jason was protected, excused, rescued. Dad wiped his eyes. I thought I was being fair. I looked at him. "I know." But I wasn't. I didn't say anything. He stared at the floor. "You carried too much." That one sentence hit me harder than I expected, because nobody had ever said that to me. Ever. I looked at my father. For the first time tonight, I didn't see a parent who had favorites. I saw a man who'd made mistakes. A man who was finally seeing them. I put my hand on his shoulder. "You did your best." He laughed sadly. "My best wasn't very good." I smiled a little. "It was good enough." He looked at me. I looked toward Jason. It just wasn't perfect. Dad started crying again. At this point, I think we'd all run out of tears. The guests quietly started leaving. Nobody complained. Nobody gossiped. Most people simply hugged Melissa. A few hugged Jason. The ballroom slowly emptied. Within an hour, only the family remained. The wedding cake still sat untouched. Flowers covered the tables. The dance floor was empty. Jason stared at everything. Then he laughed once. A sad laugh. I spent $30,000 on a wedding that isn't happening. Nobody knew what to say. Then I stood. I walked to the cake table, picked up a fork, and cut myself a piece. Everyone looked at me. I took a bite. Honestly, it was pretty good. I looked at them. What? Melissa laughed. A small laugh. Then another. Even her father smiled. I cut another piece and handed it to Dad. Then another for Melissa. A few minutes later, all of us were standing around eating wedding cake. No music, no speeches, no celebration. Just exhausted people eating expensive cake. And somehow, it felt strangely peaceful. Finally, Jason looked at me. What happens now? I thought about it. Then I answered honestly. Tomorrow, you call a therapist. He nodded. Then, you call a financial counselor. He nodded again. Then, you stop lying. Silence. To everyone, I looked at him, especially yourself. He nodded slowly. Then he looked at Melissa. Can I call you someday? She smiled sadly. When you're healthy. He nodded. I'll try. No. She shook her head. Do it. He looked at her, and for the first time all night, I saw something different in his eyes. Not panic, not fear, acceptance. A year later, Jason had been gambling free for 11 months. He lived in a small apartment. He attended therapy every week. He was paying off his debts. Slowly, painfully, but honestly. Melissa didn't marry him, but they became friends again. Sometimes they had coffee. Sometimes they didn't talk for weeks. There was no fairy tale ending, just two people healing. Dad moved into my guest room, not because he had nowhere else to go, because we both wanted him there. Every Sunday, the three of us have dinner together. Me, Dad, Jason. Sometimes we talk about sports. Sometimes we talk about work. Sometimes we talk about Mom. And every now and then, we eat cake because of all the strange things that happened that night. The thing I remember most isn't the debt, or the lies, or the canceled wedding. It's the image of our broken family standing around an untouched wedding cake, finally telling each other the truth. Because sometimes a family doesn't heal when everything goes right. Sometimes it heals only after everything falls apart. My brother lost his wedding that night. My father lost his illusion of who his son was. And I lost 20 years of resentment. Somehow, I think I got the best deal out of all of us.